The first time Emma saw them that week, she wasn't sure she wanted to. She had avoided the park for days, avoided the small cafe where they always met, avoided the thought of laughing at jokes she wasn't sure she belonged to. The leaves had turned gold and crimson, drifting lazily to the ground, and the wind carried a chill that made her hug herself tighter. She walked slowly along the familiar path, trying to convince herself that seeing Daniel and Claire wouldn't hurt, that maybe this time she could just watch from afar. But she didn't want to watch, not really, because in the way Daniel's eyes always found hers, in the way Claire's smile warmed the air around her, there was a pull she couldn't resist. Emma's feet moved almost on their own, guided by some quiet insistence in her chest. She rounded the corner, and there they were, sitting on their favorite bench, Claire's scarf wrapped neatly around her neck, Daniel's jacket slightly rumpled, his hair falling across his forehead as he laughed at something she couldn't hear. The sight made her chest ache in a way she couldn't name. Daniel looked up first, his expression softening when he saw her. There was a hesitation, almost a question, in his eyes, but he waved gently, and Claire followed with a smile that could have melted stone. "Emma," Claire called, her voice carrying across the park, "come sit with us." The words were simple, casual even, but Emma felt the weight of them, as if they were offering her a choice she had long denied herself. Her steps faltered, and she swallowed hard, wondering if this was a mistake, if she had imagined the longing that had been building inside her. But the warmth in their voices, the ease in their laughter, beckoned her forward, and she realized that the part of her that had always wanted to belong was stronger than the fear that tried to hold her back. As she approached, Daniel stood and offered her a hand, a small gesture that carried more meaning than words ever could. She hesitated just a moment, then placed her hand in his, feeling the faint tremor in his grip that mirrored her own nervousness. The space between them seemed charged, filled with all the unspoken feelings she had tried to ignore. Yet as she lowered herself onto the bench beside them, something shifted, something that made the autumn air feel warmer, the falling leaves softer, the laughter sweeter. Claire leaned back, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, and looked at Emma with that same quiet understanding she always carried. "We were just talking about the fall festival," Claire said. "It would be nice if you joined us." Her tone wasn't pleading. It wasn't demanding. It was gentle, and it carried the promise of acceptance, a promise that Emma hadn't realized she was craving. She nodded slowly, trying to steady her racing heart. "I'd like that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but Daniel and Claire heard it clearly. The afternoon stretched lazily around them, filled with laughter, shared stories, and quiet observations of the world around them. Emma found herself smiling, genuinely, in a way she hadn't for weeks, the warmth in Daniel's eyes when he looked at her, the way Claire occasionally nudged her in playful teasing, made her feel seen, made her feel wanted, made her realize how lonely she had been in her own thoughts. And yet, even in the midst of comfort, there was a tension, a quiet question that hung between them, something unspoken yet unmistakable. Daniel would glance at her occasionally, lingering just a moment too long, and Emma would feel her breath catch. Her mind raced, wondering if she was reading too much into the subtle touches, the shared smiles, the way their hands would brush accidentally, then linger just slightly, just enough to make her heart pound and her thoughts scatter. Claire, always perceptive, noticed the shift, but didn't make a scene, didn't point it out. Instead, she kept the conversation flowing, laughing, teasing, including Emma in a way that made her feel like she had always belonged. It was in these quiet moments that Emma realized she had underestimated the pull of friendship, of connection, of love that started not with fireworks but with shared mornings and gentle encouragement. The sun began its slow descent, casting a golden haze across the park, and Emma shivered slightly, not from the cold but from the intensity of the feeling stirring inside her. Daniel noticed immediately and offered her his jacket, a simple act, but one that made her feel protected, cared for, and seen all at once. She hesitated, then accepted, draping it around her shoulders, feeling the warmth not just of the fabric, but of the thought behind it. They continued talking as the light faded. The conversation turned to their favorite memories of past festivals, favorite books, movies that had made them laugh or cry, and each story revealed a layer of themselves, layers that Emma felt privileged to witness. She shared a few stories of her own, hesitant at first, then more freely as she realized how easy it was to open up to them, how safe she felt, and how much she had missed this. Daniel's voice carried a quiet intensity when he asked, "Have you ever thought about joining us, not just for today, but more often?" The words were careful, gentle, and Emma's stomach twisted with anticipation. She looked at him, searching his face for signs of jest, of casual friendship, but found only sincerity, something deep and unwavering, that made her heart skip a beat. She had long avoided taking risks in her personal life, long feared being too vulnerable, but in that moment, she felt the desire to leap, to trust, to belong. Claire reached out, placing a hand lightly on Emma's shoulder, grounding her in the present. "It would be nice," she said softly. "You don't have to think too much, just be here." There was no pressure, only acceptance, and Emma realized how rare that feeling was, how extraordinary it was to be invited into someone's world without conditions, without expectation, only warmth and care. Her mind flashed back to the lonely evenings she had spent avoiding connections, telling herself she wasn't ready, she wasn't enough, she didn't belong. But now, sitting between Daniel and Claire, hearing their laughter, feeling the weight of their gazes, Emma understood that belonging was not something she had to earn. It was something offered freely by those willing to see her, all of her imperfections and hopes, and still want her there. Time passed, and the park emptied, the shadows stretching longer as the sun finally dipped below the horizon. Emma noticed how natural it felt to be beside them, how her heart had begun to accept the possibility of closeness without fear. She laughed at a joke Daniel made, the sound mingling with Claire's chuckle, and felt a thrill of connection that she hadn't known she was missing. As they stood to leave, Daniel walked beside her, close enough for their shoulders to touch, and Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of comfort, longing, and quiet hope. Claire's hand brushed lightly against hers as they exited, another silent reassurance that she was welcome, and Emma realized she had been craving this for longer than she had admitted, that she had been waiting for someone to ask, to insist, to make her feel like she was worth staying for. By the time they reached the edge of the park, night had settled, the streetlights casting a soft glow over the path. Emma's chest felt full, alive with anticipation and nervous excitement. She didn't know what the next days would bring, didn't know if she could navigate the emotions now tangled in her heart, but she knew one thing for certain: she didn't want to walk away, not this time, not from them, not from the possibility of belonging and being loved in ways she had never dared imagine. And as she watched Daniel and Claire walk ahead, their laughter fading into the quiet night, Emma felt a resolve settle within her, quiet and steady. She would stay, she would allow herself to feel, to hope, to let the unspoken promise between them grow. The first step had been taken, and though the future was uncertain, she realized that sometimes the bravest act was simply to remain, to let others in, and to trust that love could find its way through the quietest moments. Emma paused at the park gate, taking a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, she smiled freely, fully, knowing that she had chosen the harder, better path, the one that led to connection, intimacy, and the possibility of something extraordinary. The path where hearts could intertwine gently, without force or fear, and where staying wasn't just an act of courage, but an act of love. After that afternoon in the park, Emma felt a shift inside her, something she hadn't expected. Her days were suddenly brighter, her thoughts no longer lonely, and the small ache of longing she had carried for so long began to soften. She found herself looking forward to seeing Daniel and Claire, anticipating their laughter, the easy flow of their conversations, and the quiet moments that spoke more than words ever could. They met almost every day after that, sometimes at the park, sometimes at the little cafe on the corner. Emma noticed the small rituals that made their time together feel safe and intimate, the way Claire always offered her a sip of coffee first, the way Daniel would brush imaginary dust off her jacket when she arrived, little gestures filled with unspoken care. She realized that these moments were forming a foundation, subtle but unshakable, something she had longed for but didn't know how to ask for. One evening, they decided to walk along the river, the lights reflecting softly on the water's surface, creating a quiet glow around them. Emma felt the cool breeze brush against her skin, and she noticed how natural it felt to be in their presence, how her laughter came easier, how her words felt lighter. Daniel talked about his week, stories from work and friends, and Emma found herself hanging on every word, not just for the content, but because his voice had become a comfort, a rhythm she wanted to be part of. Claire teased him gently, rolling her eyes at some of his dramatic exaggerations, and Emma laughed, feeling that warmth spread through her chest. She caught Daniel's glance and noticed a flicker of something unspoken there, a careful attention that made her pulse quicken. She didn't need him to say anything. The way he looked at her told her all she needed to know, and she realized that connection didn't always require words. Sometimes it existed simply in the shared moments, the subtle touches, the small, ordinary gestures. Emma's heart was beginning to open, but fear still lingered, a quiet whisper at the edge of her mind telling her to hold back, to protect herself. She had been hurt before, had been left standing outside watching others laugh together, and the memory made her cautious. Yet every time Daniel's fingers brushed hers by accident, or Claire nudged her gently in encouragement, that fear began to fade, replaced by a warmth she hadn't thought she could feel again. One night, after an evening of coffee and quiet conversation, they sat on a bench overlooking the river, the city lights twinkling like tiny stars on the water. Daniel reached out subtly, his hand brushing against hers, and Emma felt the electricity of the touch, sudden and gentle at the same time. She looked at him, searching for any sign that she was imagining it, and found only sincerity, a quiet intensity that made her stomach flutter. She had never felt a tension like this, not from anyone. Not in this calm, patient, caring way. Claire smiled knowingly, leaning back to give them space, and Emma felt a sense of safety she hadn't realized she craved. They didn't speak of what had just happened, but the silence wasn't awkward, it was filled with unspoken understanding. And Emma found herself relaxing, letting go of the tight grip she had on her own heart, trusting that she was wanted, that she was seen, and that this connection was real. Days turned into weeks, and Emma noticed how her thoughts were constantly drawn to them, to the way Daniel smiled when he caught her gaze, to the way Claire's laughter seemed to echo in her chest. She realized she was falling into something deeper than friendship, and the awareness made her both excited and terrified. She didn't want to ruin what they had, but she also couldn't ignore the feelings that had begun to bloom inside her. One afternoon, they decided to bake together at Claire's apartment, a plan that turned into a mess of flour, laughter, and playful arguments over who had ruined the dough. Emma laughed until tears came to her eyes, Daniel holding her gently when she slipped on the flour-covered floor, and Claire snapping pictures with her phone, capturing every imperfect, joyful moment. The day ended with them sitting on the couch, exhausted, messy, and happy, sharing stories and dreams as the sun set behind the city skyline. In those moments, Emma began to understand that love wasn't always about grand gestures or dramatic confessions. Sometimes it was in the laughter shared over spilled sugar, in the quiet glance across a room, in the hand that found yours when you least expected it, and she found herself letting go of the fear of losing, choosing instead to savor the moments, to be present, to allow herself to feel. One evening, as they walked through the city streets, the soft hum of traffic around them, Daniel's hand brushed hers again, this time more deliberately, and Emma felt her heart leap. She looked at him, unsure if she should pull away or stay, and he only smiled softly, a silent reassurance that she was safe, that she belonged. The simple connection, the unspoken promise, was enough to make her pulse quicken. She had never imagined intimacy could feel so gentle, so patient, so alive. Claire noticed the subtle changes, the way Emma lingered near Daniel, the way Daniel's eyes softened when they met hers, but she didn't interrupt, didn't comment. She simply offered quiet support, a smile that said, "I see you," and that was enough. Because in their small circle, Emma realized that love didn't need to be possessive or dramatic. It could be steady, nurturing, a quiet storm that filled her heart without overwhelming it. They spent one evening sitting on the rooftop of Claire's building, watching the city lights twinkle below, sipping warm tea, and sharing memories of childhood and dreams for the future. Emma felt a sense of belonging that she hadn't known existed. She was part of something gentle, yet powerful, a connection that didn't demand perfection, only presence and care. Daniel's hand found hers once again, their fingers intertwining naturally, comfortably, as if they had always been meant to fit together. Emma realized she had been waiting for this feeling for years, waiting for a place where she could be herself without fear, waiting for someone to see her fully and still want her, and now she had found it in the most unexpected way. Not in grand gestures or dramatic confessions, but in quiet, consistent moments that built trust and love brick by brick. She felt her chest swell with gratitude and longing, knowing that she had been brave enough to step into this world, to allow herself to stay, to allow herself to feel. One rainy evening, as they walked home together under umbrellas, Daniel caught her hand and held it lightly. Emma's pulse quickened at the contact, her heart thudding with a mixture of fear and excitement. She glanced at him, and he simply smiled, a quiet, knowing smile that made her feel seen, cherished, and alive. Claire walked beside them, her hand brushing Emma's gently in reassurance, and the three of them moved together in perfect harmony, a small trio against the rain and the world. That night, sitting in her apartment later, Emma replayed the day in her mind, the laughter, the shared touches, the quiet, comforting moments, and she realized she had never felt this alive, never felt so connected. She was no longer an observer, standing outside their world. She was inside, part of the rhythm, part of the warmth, part of something that felt like home. She thought about the first day she had joined them, remembered the fear and hesitation, and smiled at how far she had come. The moments of doubt, the small insecurities, seemed distant now, replaced by trust, affection, and a budding, gentle love that she didn't have to name to feel. She had allowed herself to be seen, and in return, she had been welcomed fully, without condition or reservation. As weeks passed, Emma noticed how natural it felt to share her thoughts, her worries, her small joys with them. She no longer felt the need to guard herself, the need to stay distant, because she had learned that staying, simply being present, was its own act of courage, and with every shared smile, every quiet touch, every laugh and story, she felt the bond between them strengthen, delicate yet unbreakable, something that could weather fear, doubt, and uncertainty. Emma's heart was full of questions, yes, but also full of hope. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know how deep this connection could go, but she knew one thing clearly. She had chosen to stay, to let herself belong, to allow love to grow slowly, gently, naturally, and in the soft glow of the city lights, the quiet rhythm of shared laughter and gentle touches, she understood that love, real love, could be patient, nurturing, and entirely worth the risk. And as they parted that night, Daniel walking her to her door, Claire waving softly, Emma felt a quiet thrill, a mixture of anticipation and longing. She realized that this was only the beginning, the first chapter in something beautiful, something fragile and strong at the same time, something that demanded courage, patience, and trust. She took a deep breath, stepping inside, and knew that tomorrow she would meet them again, ready to continue the journey she had finally dared to begin. The first snow of the season fell softly that morning, dusting the city in a delicate layer of white, and Emma felt a thrill run through her as she stepped outside, her scarf wrapped snugly around her neck. Her breath came in small clouds as she walked toward Claire's apartment, anticipation fluttering in her chest. It had been weeks since she had let herself fully open to the warmth of their connection, and now she couldn't wait to see them, to feel that quiet joy she had begun to crave so deeply. Daniel and Claire were already waiting at the small cafe near the park, the warm light spilling across the window, and Emma's heart leapt at the sight of them. Their smiles were gentle, inviting, filled with a familiarity that made her feel at home. She hurried inside, brushing the snow from her coat, and felt the tension of the week slip away the moment they called her name, Emma. Claire's voice rang like music, and Daniel's eyes held that same soft intensity she had learned to recognize. They spent the morning talking, laughing, and sharing stories, Emma noticing how effortless it had become to be with them, how natural it felt to fit into their little world. She realized that she hadn't just been welcomed, she had been needed, wanted even. And the thought made her chest tighten with gratitude and longing. Daniel reached across the table occasionally, brushing his fingers against hers in small, subtle ways, and each touch made her pulse quicken, but she didn't pull away, not anymore. After coffee, they decided to take a walk in the park, the snow crunching softly under their boots. The air was crisp, and the branches above sparkled with frost. Emma felt the world had transformed into a place of quiet magic, a backdrop for the emotions that had grown quietly in her heart. Claire tossed a small snowball at Daniel, and Emma laughed, the sound mingling with theirs, creating a harmony that filled her chest with warmth. Daniel looked at her then, the snow catching in his hair, his eyes brighter than usual, and Emma felt her stomach twist with a mixture of excitement and fear. She wanted to speak, to tell him everything she felt, but words seemed fragile, insufficient. Instead, she let her gaze linger, trusting that he could read her feelings as clearly as she could read his. There was a subtle shift in the air, a gentle acknowledgement of the bond they had built, something neither needed to define with words to feel completely real. Claire noticed, of course, but she didn't comment, only smiled softly, stepping a little to the side, giving them space without breaking the rhythm they had found. Emma felt a rush of gratitude for Claire's quiet understanding, and she realized that love wasn't always about declarations or drama. Sometimes it was about presence, patience, and shared moments. The trio moved together through the park, connected without need for explanations. Each step a reinforcement of the trust and affection that had grown steadily over the past weeks. As they reached the frozen fountain, Daniel stopped and turned to face her, snowflakes clinging to his hair and jacket. He reached for her hand deliberately this time, his fingers intertwining with hers in a way that left no doubt. Emma's heart leapt, her pulse quickening at the contact. She looked at him, searching for reassurance, and found only calm sincerity, a quiet intensity that made her chest ache in the best possible way. "It's okay," Claire said softly, placing a hand over theirs. "You don't have to explain, just be here." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of trust, love, and acceptance. Emma felt her chest swell as the warmth of their combined presence enveloped her. For the first time, she understood that belonging wasn't about performing, impressing, or guarding herself. It was about showing up, daring to stay, and allowing love to grow naturally. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the snow, and the three of them sat on a nearby bench, sharing stories of childhood, hopes, and small secrets. Emma found herself opening up more than she ever had before, feeling safe to reveal the small fears and dreams she had kept hidden. Daniel listened with gentle attention, occasionally offering a soft word of encouragement, while Claire laughed and teased in a way that made Emma feel fully included, fully loved. As the sky turned to dusky pink, Daniel leaned closer, brushing a strand of snowdamp hair from her face, and Emma felt a shiver of excitement run through her. She didn't pull away, didn't speak, simply let herself feel the quiet intensity of the moment, and realized that love could be patient, tender, and profoundly moving without needing grand declarations. It was in the shared glances, the gentle touches, the small acts of care, that the heart truly spoke. Later, they walked back through the city streets, the snow now falling more steadily, the lights reflecting in the glistening streets. Emma's fingers stayed intertwined with Daniel's, and Claire occasionally brushed her hand against hers in reassurance. The rhythm of their steps perfectly aligned. She felt the weight of the world outside vanish, leaving only the warmth between them, a bubble of connection that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't imagined possible. Arriving at her apartment, Daniel and Claire lingered in the doorway, reluctant to let the moment end. Emma felt a bittersweet ache, wishing she could pause time, wishing she could remain in the safety and warmth of their closeness indefinitely. Daniel looked at her, a soft smile playing on his lips. "I'm glad you stayed," he said simply, and Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. The words carried more meaning than any grand confession ever could. Claire smiled, stepping forward to squeeze her hand. "We asked you to join us, Emma, and you didn't walk away." Her voice was quiet, gentle, but every word resonated with the depth of what they had shared. Emma felt the full weight of the moment, realizing how brave she had been to allow herself to belong, to feel, to love. She smiled, tears spilling over, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming joy of being seen, accepted, and cherished. Inside her apartment, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from hesitant steps in the park to the quiet intimacy of shared laughter and touches. She thought about the moments of doubt, the fear of being rejected, the cautious distance she had maintained for so long, and she felt a sense of triumph, not over anyone else, but over her own hesitations and insecurities. She had dared to stay, to belong, and in doing so, she had found something extraordinary. The following days were filled with more shared moments, walks, coffee dates, and quiet evenings in. Each interaction layered more trust, more intimacy, more warmth into their bond. Emma noticed how natural it had become to include herself fully in their world, How her heart no longer wavered at the thought of closeness, how laughter and gentle touches had replaced fear and distance. She had learned that love wasn't a rush, a conquest, or a declaration. It was presence, consistency, and care. One snowy evening, they found themselves sitting by the window of Claire's apartment, watching the city sparkle under the lights, sipping hot chocolate and sharing memories of past winters. Daniel brushed a strand of hair from Emma's face again, and she leaned into the touch, feeling a sense of belonging she had never imagined possible. Claire laughed softly at some silly memory, her eyes warm and knowing, and Emma felt that love could exist in many forms, not just romantic, not just platonic, but in the delicate balance of connection and trust. Emma realized that staying, that choosing to be present with them, had been the bravest and most rewarding decision of her life. She had allowed herself to be vulnerable, to feel, and in return, she had been met with care, attention, and a love that wasn't possessive or demanding, but steady, patient, and real. She thought about all the times she had doubted herself, all the moments she had turned away from connection, and she smiled at the irony. Sometimes the hardest step was simply to remain. To trust, to let love grow at its own pace. By the time the first snow melted and winter deepened, Emma, Daniel, and Claire had built a bond that was unshakable, a quiet, enduring connection that didn't need constant affirmation, only presence and care. They shared laughter, dreams, and quiet moments, the rhythm of their days perfectly intertwined, and Emma understood that love could be gentle, it could be patient, and it could change everything simply by choosing to stay, to be seen, to allow herself to belong. One evening, as they walked back from the park, the city quiet around them, Emma realized she had never felt more alive, more understood, more loved. Daniel's hand found hers, Claire's hand brushed lightly against hers, and she felt the full sweep of emotion she had long denied herself. She had taken the risk to belong, to trust, to feel, and in return, she had been given a love that was gentle, nurturing, and profoundly real. Standing on the corner of her street, Daniel and Claire lingered, neither wanting to break the moment. Emma felt her chest swell with gratitude and longing, knowing that this connection, this love, would continue to grow, that it would endure challenges, joys, and quiet nights like this. She smiled at them, feeling the warmth of shared understanding and unspoken promises, and realized that sometimes the greatest act of courage was simply to remain, to belong, and to love. And as she stepped inside her apartment, the lights dimmed and the snow falling softly outside, Emma knew that this was only the beginning, that their bond would deepen, that their hearts would continue to intertwine, and that she had finally found a place where she was safe, loved, and entirely at home. The journey hadn't been easy, but the reward was profound, and in that quiet, snow-lit evening, Emma understood the truth she had long sought. Love, real love, comes to those who dare to stay, to trust, and to belong.